dear viewers. Welcome to the Focus on Parliament show with me, your host, Okot Ola. Today, we discuss matters crucial as we move into the end of this financial year and on to the next. There are a lot of fiscal issues to be deliberated upon, and all eyes are on our government to see how they manage several issues that affect us, how they collect tax, how they gather money to fund the budget, and several other factors that my dear colleagues here will help to break down for you. We have a lot of interesting instances that have happened in the last 1 week, including the beating of women MPs yesterday. We had the passing of one of our economic thinkers, Keith Muhakanizi, actually his final burial, and a lot of these instances that many times define our national journey as Uganda. And we will be discussing all those topics together with my colleagues right here. For today, our dear viewers, we have Honorable Moses Alepe, the MP of Chekwi County. We have David Kizito, a program officer at Transparency International, will be helping a lot to break down some of the complex economic and tax issues. Then we have Honorable my brother Michael Aboneka, counsel, an advocate with Thomas and Michael Advocates. You're most welcome. And just to go quickly, to start with Honorable Moses, yesterday we saw, I could say, a bit of disturbing scenes at Parliament. Sometimes when we see you people, we think, wow, this is the peak of being a Ugandan. But then when we see your colleague, Honorable Nyakato, I believe, and others being treated in that manner, it does raise concern. I don't know what were your reflections, and as a parliament, I understand last evening there was a discussion on this. As a parliament, how you are processing this matter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Okot. Good morning, viewers. It's a pleasure being here again. Unfortunately, we are beginning on matters that are not so good to talk about. I'm sure if you've been following, these issues are arising from the celebrations of the Women's Days that were held in various districts and cities. And there were some incidents, I think in Soroti, Oima City, and Buvuma Island District. And this particular incident was triggered by what had happened in Buvuma, where Honorable Susan Nakaziwe was actually assaulted by police, and she was beaten badly. I didn't really see the videos of the beating, but I saw the pictures. They looked really bad. And before yesterday, some members of parliament, the ladies, had actually petitioned the speaker, the office of the speaker, about the brutality which police admitted on their colleague. And of course, really to sound the alarm bells that actually the way police enforces is really very unacceptable. And so yesterday they wanted to take a petition to the Minister of Internal Affairs, and I think they wanted to hold a very peaceful demonstration. They had placards on them, and immediately they stepped out of the parliament precincts. They were restrained and a scuffle ensued. Of course, the point of concern is the way the whole issue was handled by the police. It was so brutal, very, very pathetic, unacceptable, and we condemned really as parliament such acts, not because they are members of parliament, but I think we condemned it generally. That is not good for people who are supposed to protect the citizens of this country, or people who are supposed to keep law and order, to be the ones making such acts, brutal acts on citizens. And I hope really the executive will take this seriously. Yeah. Of course, we got a statement from the Minister of Internal Affairs in Parliament, which was characteristic. The usual, we also condemn the air stamps and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think what we wanted is to go down so that the culprits or people who made those actions should be held culpable. and we hope to follow that all through. It's really very unfortunate that such a thing can still happen in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my brother, Council Aboneka, in the light of what Honorable has said, being a member of Parliament, what on your side as a citizen watching our parliamentarians, our leaders being treated in such a manner, what were your reflections?
So thank you. And it's not a shock. It would have been a shock if police, escorted them and they were able to, submit their petition to the Minister of Internal Affairs. But it is unfortunate. The event was unfortunate, but at the same time good. If you look at the spectrum of things, it has come to the point that it doesn't matter who you are in this country. That when we speak about rule of law, when we speak about people respecting the Constitution, that it can happen on anyone. If there is an abrogation of rule of law, and if there is a violation of the Constitution and the rights of Ugandans, it can happen to you.
Yeah.
Now, every day people have been saying, we have a matter of national importance. Here on Thursday, I think, there's always matters of national importance. My people are being beaten. Now, this time around, it is you. Okay?
Yeah.
And I hope that that one goes down to the root of, we have a problem. And it's unfortunate, but fortunate that now it has happened to the MPs themselves. It had to carry the entire speaker to go to CPS and negotiate to have her people out. So that shows you that we have come to a level where, and there's something wrong fundamentally, I think, with the institution of police and other agencies. Because court has already pronounced that POMA and all these things, you cannot limit the freedom to us to peacefully assemble.
Yeah.
You cannot. So where does police get authority to say you cannot?
Yeah.
So there are two problems: a total abrogation of the rule of law, failure to respect the rule of law, but also I don't know whether these officers the training nowadays they have is on how to beat Ugandan. Because you see, the police is supposed to protect and serve.
Yes.
That is their motto or whatever. But now, when you see police doing that, the man of arrest in this country is very deplorable.
Yeah.
The Constitution is clear in Article 23 on how we should arrest someone. And I have challenged police, I want to challenge it again, to show me any incident where they have conducted an arrest in the manner that the Constitution provides for.
Yeah.
This thing looks ugly on all of us,
Yes.
on the entire nation. You don't know how many people are asking outside the country, what's happening in your country? They thought the country is, all of us are being arrested.
Yes.
Because that picture is very bad for the nation. And I know that the Ugandan Law Society, even before the event of the MPs had written, had written a statement, and actually we are saying as Uganda Law Society, we are going to pick each and every individual. Action must be taken. But also, the Uganda Human Rights Commission has summoned the IGP to appear before the commission to explain why there is continuous violation and violent beating of Ugandans when they are demonstrating. Lastly, this is a selection approach of, I know some rallies of NRM MP that are going on now, and they have gone on unabated.
Yeah.
No tear gas, no what. But how come for the meetings of other people, you mean women MPs cannot celebrate Women's Day celebrations in their constituency? So then why are they MPs? So the whole thing is ugly, and I want to end and say that you see, we are at pains as taxpayers.
Yeah.
That I pay you to beat me.
Yes.
That shouldn't be heard of. And I think that the IGP should rein in, even before it goes to the Human Rights Commission. We should rein in and make sure that we instill discipline. Because I will look forward to a country where people are peacefully demonstrating. Police is supposed to protect people. But now if you're beating the people who are protesting against police brutality, then tomorrow it's going to be something else. And it will burst out and we won't be able to handle the magnitude.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Aboneka. And I think you bring in the topic of government as a service, given that we are taxpayers who bankroll it. And I think we shall be entering deeper into that discussion. But also would like to give our brother, Mr. Kizito, an opportunity, just before we usher into our fiscal discussions, what you thought about the instances at Parliament.
Probably from our side, I think some of those instances shouldn't be treated in isolation with other incidences happening in other sectors. And from an accountability angle, when a servant takes the position of a master, then you know that everything is going to be messed up. And that's what we are now trying to see in our country and even in other institutions. When you look at most of the scandals, police brutality, corruption scandals, embezzlement, and all these, we have bred a feeling of impunity. We are in that position where the people that are actually supposed to serve the Ugandans have grown a thick skin that they no longer want to care anymore. And now when an ordinary Ugandan comes out to demand for, their civic rights,
Yes.
now it becomes the opposite. And that's now what's happening in police, because police basically is supposed to protect, but then now the people that are supposed to be protected are the ones probably now protecting police, and that's quite sad. And you can compare it with the other scandals. When you look at the current exhibitions, where you think that you should give your views to an agency, and then probably they give you good feedback, then they call you backing dogs and things like that. So we think as a country we set a wrong precedence, and it's not easy to reverse that trend.
Yeah.
And we've created now also some kind of gods. We are also doubting whether, the IGP still has control over his institution, because these things have been happening really, and every normal Ugandan can attest to that. And I think the epitome of it is that it has happened to Parliament, and even at Parliament, and with the members of Parliament. So probably let's watch out and see whether we shall have positive change, but would want the change to be reflected and manifested in all the other agencies, not only the police.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think from what we are discussing, something beautiful about pain is that it unites people.
Unfortunately.
At least in argument, we can see here that nobody really agrees with pain.
No, never.
And that is clearly reflected in Chapter 4 of our Constitution. But just to move into the matters, I know we are here to discuss economic issues and the economic journey of our country on the fiscal side. But maybe as they always say, and this is over to you, Honorables, that times are defined by leaders. And in the last 30 years, perhaps the economy that you've lived most of your life, a lot of the pivotal economic figures, we had Mutebile, we had Chris Kasami, and Keith Muhakenizi, the trio that are the most prominent, at least in the neoliberal days of Uganda, starting the early 90s. He passed away recently after a long fight with cancer. He has his track record in government. What's your take on the legacy of Keith, but not just Keith? The whole generation of economists and the economy that they designed for Uganda.
Yeah, thank you, Okot. I'm sure most of us have been following the public space and the discussion about the role of people who have really played a role in the economic transformation of this country. And this mainly following some reforms that have helped this country pick up. Sometime in early 2000s,
yes,
of course, Uganda was one of the highly indebted poor countries. And definitely a certain type of reforms had to be undertaken for the country to embrace. And at that time, it required certain bold decisions to be taken. And this country had these two schools of thought. And the trio you're talking about, I think, carried the day. The other dissenting economic intervention was harbored by, I think, Dr. Suruma, the conservative and people-centered type of economy.
Yeah.
The people who didn't think about how very openly outrightly going for divestiture and privatization, the way we went full scale. But the ones that carried the day were actually the people like the late Mutebi, the late Mwakanizi now.
Yeah.
They definitely followed those reforms, and I think it helped. If you know, at least our economy had picked up and was really growing at a good rate. The reforms both on the economy and then financial management, public financial management, were made, and I think it made us go to a good trajectory. Only that at a later time, we of course hit by certain external factors. Of course, the most recent one being the COVID and then this Iraq war. But I think they played a very key role. If you really look at the public financial management reforms that were put in place, they really helped us rationalize expenditure at one time, and even at one time, I think even manage debt to a good extent, and also be able to not only manage the borrowing but also the payments. And I thought that was really key. You know, in an economy, you can't really avoid borrowing, but what is important is how do you manage the borrowing, using it on the sectors that are very useful. Those are productive sectors that can make you earn foreign exchange. That foreign exchange can be used later when the loans fall due to pay off those things. I know that's what this team at least did. Then on public expenditure, though later it really opened, but at least the management to streamline, to make sure the controls were really in place. Budget control was good, and really that peaked between 2006 and 2013, 14 there. So they streamlined financial management, they streamlined public expenditure, and also debt management. So these are people who really played a role, and I think they have set a foundation that we should really try to leverage on. I know, I mean, these challenges that we are going on now. I know one other characteristic was, which I should also mention, is the team was a very bold team who were not shy to tell the people that were supervising them what it meant. You know, it is rare.
That is the donors.
No, I talk about even government itself, the executive. So it is rare to get a technical person being too bold to the executive. Someone who supervises them, who they think they hold their job to tell them of the bitter facts about how some of these, how the economy is supposed to be managed, how public expenditure is supposed to be managed. And this what these two really did, especially Mutebi, the late Mutebi and the late Mwakanizi. It wasn't, in fact, in most of the interactions I've had with people, the ministers would even shy to tell His Excellency the bitter facts, but he would stand up and say, no, this is not possible. And in fact, one of the key things that he discouraged was the expansion of public administration. He really talked a lot against it, and he had promised that in a few years we shall see the impact of this, the negative impact, of course, which we are really reaping now. You know, public administration expenditure is ballooned and is reaching very unsustainable levels, and it's definitely leading us to a bad trajectory in public expenditure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think only you can give really that perspective on this panel. But my brother, Council, I think for at least the three of us, we have come of age. Unlike Honorable Moses, who maybe enjoyed the rise, and a lot of them who made, someone said the richest Ugandans were born in the 60s and 70s, who made a fortune in that time. Most of us have come of age in the last decade, meaningfully. come of age in the last 1 decade, and we still had this gentleman running our economy. Given your personal view of our economy in this time, what do you introspect about a person like Keith, who is a fixture in the history of Uganda's economy?
Yes, there are a few times where I agree with the selection of this technical, and to say that actually they are very good technical people especially in the executive and these public offices. But one thing about late Keith, and I pray that he rests in peace, is his boldness. And I want to pick from my point actually was about public, expenditure. Why we are spending so much money in consumables than productive sectors. He was very strict on that. And I remember one of the expected example was about the moratorium on creating new districts. Because I think at that point it had to take government about 139 billion shillings just to establish the whole district. And I remember during his reign, I visited one of the districts, and I wanted to find out where the headquarters. Then they sent me to a room of its former mother district, and they said the entire district is now seated in this room. I'm like, what are we joking about? And those are some of the things he was bold, and he would come to Parliament and said, no, I will not release money for this one. And to me, that is very good, because then that's the legacy. And I am hoping that we currently can have the rest pick it on. The current PS is also trying. If you hear his conversations about it's real about the things that are happening, and I hope that legacy continues of being a technical person. You divorce politics from your work. The most people are fusing politics and their work because you're a technical person. You are the accounting officer, or you are whatever you are, whether you are the IT department, you must try to diffuse politics from your work. Because then there you give us the best. You give us, and it's not your problem if the people take your decision or take your opinion or not. But Keith would insist and say, I told you this is not a good thing. And you remember what Lucinda Chobe was speaking about, the proposed reforms was talking about. And these are some of the things we're pushing for. Why should the Office of the Prime Minister be the unimplemented at the same time one that is doing monitoring and evaluation of its own activities? Why should the OPM be bothered with giving people blankets? You are the Office of the Prime Minister and you're busy in petty things like blankets. So those reforms, I think, are good. And I want to say this as I end and give way to my brother, is as in terms of legacy, in most cases we do, Motebile Memorial Lecture. We've just been having Joan Kagezi. Beyond the lectures, okay, can we pick some of the reforms that the late Keith proposed and we push them and make sure they work? At least he will be peaceful wherever he is. Especially the OPM and the public service. Can we reform?
So it's not true that despite his position, all his reforms were being implemented.
It's not true.
He was also an advocate.
Yes, as an advocate on his own. And I'm sure, and I'm sure, unfortunately, some people are happy he's gone. Because he was shaking tables. And it is important we have people who shake tables. We will need people who are nationalists, who say Uganda first. And we must push and have those reforms. But also, lastly, I think that it's important to also ask the conversations of where is the governor? It's almost coming to 3 years. We don't have a governor, Bank of Uganda. I think it's high time we have a governor, Bank of Uganda. Much as work is happening, but there's been a question. Okay, so I mean the three have rested.
Started signing.
Signing on the that's true. There were issues to do with that because the constitution is clear. There will be, and the Bank of Uganda Act, there will be a governor and a deputy governor.
Yes.
So you can't start hoodwinking us and saying, but the deputy can perform the functions. No, let's have the governor and streamline the physical policy, because you need straight heads actually to deal with physical policies. I know everything is politics, but we should try as much as possible to not fuse the two, like Keith did.
Thank you. And Mr. Kizito, you have had all all that has been said about the late Keith, but not just him. The group of elite economists that ran our country for the last 30 years. Unlike most of us, you have the unique opportunity to see some of the leakages, the loopholes, maybe some of the things they could not achieve. And I think that's the role of accountability, to guide us onto the future. So given what our colleagues have said about the kids and acknowledging their contribution, what do you think were some of those failures in governing the economy, and how could we improve?
Starting with the note of failures, I think you put me in a more complex position. However, we had some interactions personally with Kay.
Yes.
When he was still a PSST.
Yes.
And in one of those beautiful interactions was that Uganda was trying to adjust to the global standards of beneficial ownership transparency. Then also, we have now a growing mining and extractive sector. So we're also trying to see how we can align ourselves with the extractive industries transparency initiative. I think under his watch, those were some of the key things that he contributed to, because currently we now have a BOLO into place, and we have the honorable members of parliament that really tried so much to ensure that Uganda can step up to the task, and now they leave it up to us to ensure that we can now start identifying who are these beneficial owners or the natural persons are behind most of these companies that we see mushrooming. But also the EITI, you see, we had so many issues with contracts in especially the oil and gas sector. So we had to adopt a global tool that can ensure that government and especially Minister of Finance commits to transparency, especially availing contracts, availing some of these cash payments and tax declarations and everything. And we are there. We had our first report last year, and I think then Keith had left, but at least the legacy still remained. We also interacted with him so much on the budget transparency initiative. And currently, Uganda in Africa, we are among the best. I think we are either the second when it comes to budget transparency.
Okay.
And that has been a good one, though now when it comes to what the budget actually does, that's where the question comes in. But in terms of budget transparency, openness, participation of, stakeholders in most of these budget processes, at least that has been good. And we've seen gradual improvements during the reign of Keith. But when we go now to the legacy, I think most of those key interactions came at the time of the HIPIC, when most countries were heavily indebted and reached an extent that we wouldn't actually pay our debt. We were underperforming on our debt obligations. So we had to go through a series of discussions, and when you go into a discussion, you have to lose some and win some. And I think one of our losses was the privatization. Because currently we are in a situation where you probably would wish that government starts doing business again. When you look at the potential of, for example, the electricity and energy sector and what it could contribute to government, when you look at the transport sector, if it's being properly run by government, if you look at the telecommunication sector, if it's fully, public. When you go to other countries, for example, the UAE, some of these are key sectors that are normally run by government, and they actually make a profit. And we believe probably it's time we review some of those. Because when we went in for the HIPIC, our bankrollers suggested that there were some things we had to privatize in order probably to see more effectiveness and efficiency in running a public administration. But I think we are at that time where we are back from where we started from. Our debt to GDP has grown to worrying levels. And when you look at our tax, it's not expanding as we would wish to. Every year we have kind of some deficits. when you see the budget to what we can raise domestically, you see, we are now in a tight situation where if we don't get a debt relief in the next 10 years, probably things may not work out as they should. And we no longer have those bold persons. You know, having someone in the stature of Mutabile who can tell you that, no, we won't do this, as plain as that, I think it's not there anymore. The people we have now are yes men. You know, distribute this number of iron sheets to so and so. They just, you know, without even giving it a thought. So we think we need to either breed more bold persons, especially in the public offices. But if not, we need to review how then we can run our country going forward.
Yeah. Yes, Honorable Moses, you, among all of us here, belong to the NRM movement. And one of the biggest, I could say, paths of NRM is security and a stable economy. I think it's stable growth or steady progress. And however, if you follow the young people, we have a lot of items. One of the ways we express ourselves is memes. And when you look at these statuses, everybody's talking about economy, 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 economy.
It's now an economy.
It is everywhere. Even with the semi-literate, everyone has learned the word economy, especially in the last, I could say 6-7 years. Do you think the path of NRM that they are providing stable economic progress still stands? Or is it time for a significant change in that direction?
Okay, well, thank you. Of course, now, since I subscribe to NRM, maybe that question should have not come to me, so I would just say it is okay.
Yeah, no, you have to now defend.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so, well, the truth is, I think the role, government has three arms. It has the legislature, it has the judiciary, and then the executive. The executive shapes policies, and also implementation.
Yes.
And then judiciary is one of the arms in justice, law, and other sector.
Yes.
Keeping check on things that can create distortions or anarchy. Of course, that's what we make sure that justice, law, and other sector plays. Then, of course, the legislature plays the role of making the laws that can help us govern and maybe also implementing some of these intentions of a government. And then, of course, the oversight role. I think what is one thing that everybody knows and even talks about, the policies that this country develops. The laws that we make are really beautiful. Everybody talks about it. But where we lack is how to implement some of these policies and also the laws. I mean, we have just been talking on how even those we charge with keeping law and order are not really helping us. I think what is important is the leadership of this country, government for this matter, has to respect the bit that the roles of governing this country can be played by all people. Be it on political, be it on economic and even social aspects. Definitely, when you also look at the manifesto of NRM, you really see they have good intentions for this country. But only that along the way, things just get a bit lost. And that's where I think the problem is. Sometimes, of course, people can say that maybe those that are supposed to play the role of checking are not helping. But those also play their part. I was telling someone the other time that you see, when, for example, Parliament initiates an investigation and puts recommendations, the recommendations actually go back to the executive. Okay? the executive is supposed to implement those. And those that they are not able to implement, they should throw back and say, it is not possible to implement this because of ABCD. And then what other alternative can be there? But I think for all intents and purposes, what is planned for this country is, first of all, very consultative. You find it is well-intentioned. The real problem is on the implementation, which also the executive accepts that sometimes we really go wrong. We identify what is good for these people of this country, but along the way, we just merely get lost.
Yes.
So what am I saying? I'm saying government, through the role of guidance, also consults very much and really comes up with very, very plausible and good intentions and programs, policies for this country. But the only problem is, I think the executive is not helping us in the implementation. It is not helping us in the implementation, and that's where we go. Even when you go and look at the tax policies that are there in this country, they are really well-intentioned, properly designed, but the problem is
including
following them.
The recent propositions.
Yeah, there are some propositions, of course, that they have made now. They are really good, but the problem is along the way we just get lost. I don't know how some things come along the way and distort what we are intentional to do. So that's where the problem is. But I should say that this government, or NRM government, when you look at this manifesto, when you look at the intentions, when you look at the yearly annual programs that it has for the people of this country, they are really good enough. It is just the shortfall of it along the way when they are supposed to implement.
Do you still believe we are in steady progress?
Yeah, I think we are, but just like I've told you, you know, if we have 3 stones for cooking, if one really is a bit, if it's shorter than the other, you will find that actually the boiling and the water in that pan is compromised, might splash. Even the mingling will definitely be compromised. So I think what is important is let's make sure that all the 3 arms of government move in tandem, and let also the executive really take implementation seriously, and where pitfalls are identified, it should really take in good faith and make sure that the recommendations that they are proposed for them to do are put in place rightfully.
Mr. Boneka, Honorable Moses implies in his statements that he strongly believes there is progress. The speed is a matter of debate, but he strongly believes we're still in the direction. We have had tough economic times. Everyone could feel it in the last few years. Perhaps Honorable Moses is being too harsh on himself. Could the international context also be affecting the Ugandan economy, or is it purely on us within the country?
Thank you, and I want to thank Honorable Moses for being honest. In most cases, people just argue and just want to argue and feel good about, you know, NRM. It's good to be honest, and I must commend him for that. Because you see, if we don't discuss these things within the context and the honesty, then we lose it. So from that point, I want to say that first of all, it's not easy to manage an economy, but that's the reason why you take government. You have promises you're giving people that we are going to shape this. And normally there is something called force majeure, and everyone's like, COVID came and hit us. But we had Ebola, but we had Marburg. Probably tomorrow we'll have malaria, it will be an outbreak. So we need to learn from these things. And I know globally that countries are struggling. If you're following the spring meetings, there was some shocking news of how now even borrowing or IMF giving out monies to countries is going to be a challenge, because globally the monies are a problem. So then as countries, you have to start thinking of how do we finance? And for me, there has been a bad problem, a culture in terms of borrowing too much. Moreover, you borrow for what do you call them? What? For current expenditures, and not you know, and consumptions and and then you are not borrowing for production. For example, we came out of COVID-19. There was money put in the Uganda Development Bank. Who has it benefited? in terms of talking about economic recovery and all of us. You know the meme of we are broke, we have no money in the pocket. Economy, yes, economy to even me, economy to a border guy and I will be that the ease of having cash to do things.
Yes.
Okay. Now you provide a service. Someone says I don't have money to pay because government hasn't paid them.
Yeah.
So then what do you do? And there have been issues about David domestic borrowing.
Yes.
Of how now the people, I mean, the yes, government encourages domestic borrowing because now money comes back. But if I supply government and it takes me 5 years to be paid, then there is a problem. It goes circular. So I know that yes, there is a global issue. And now let me tell you,
yes,
we received a lot of grant from IMF and I think even from ADB to COVID-19. How did we use that money? Because you see, it was not just about COVID-19 vaccines but it was to help us to transit. How did we use that money? To an extent that even IMF said, we're not giving you more until you account. I don't know if they have ever counted.
Yes.
So also our practices and behavior as a country, we can't be running a 50 trillion budget and half of it has to come from elsewhere into borrowing. And almost half of it is going to pay back interest loans.
Yes.
That means that you're left with almost 40% only to work with and set the economy. You cannot.
Yeah.
Lastly, Mr. Moderator, is the issue of there is no deliberate effort to actually widen the tax base. What we are seeing is actually you're in the same people. There's no new innovation, but you're adding more taxes on the same people who are failing to pay the ones that are available.
Yeah.
So then you conscript. So instead of the money I would have used to probably grow and import more, you want to say now we were going to put we are increasing VAT on this, we are increasing tax on this. So I think that, to be honest, any government should be actually government has two roles: is to ensure that to create wealth for its citizens, but also protect that wealth. Now, taxation is a very serious physical policy for the economy. So you sit and say, this Uganda here, how do we deal with the milk? We're importing a lot of mangoes from Kenya. I mean, East African policy, East African community and what have you. But how do we promote bubu? Because during COVID-19, we're all constrained. There was no money coming in. So what is the plan? Because you must have the immediate, the mid-term, and the long-term plan.
Yeah.
So to me, where I sit and the guys, I am always interacting with garage and what have you. The economy is really hard. And you've heard sometimes the PS actually saying, guys, it's hard. We need to rethink. Let's cut public expenditure. In the neighborhood here, the president is proposing to cut 30% from the salaries of the public servants so that they're able to fix a few things.
Yes.
Can that be done here? Or the people will say, this time around, President Museveni, you're not our president because you're touching their salary. Can we reach a point where we say, do you know that we have 1.7 million elected leaders? 1.7. Now, leave alone civil service, leave alone these political leaders. 1.7. Minus even the village council, we've not even elected. 1.7. And we have to foot that bill every month.
Yes.
But what is the equivalent in terms of shaping economy and services?
Service delivery.
Because if I'm spending more money on fixing my car because of a road, then I won't be productive.
Yes.
If I'm spending more money on treatment, and let me say this, all of us here are one medical bill away from poverty.
Yes.
One medical bill away from poverty. So you see how these things are related? So the economy can't be... And that's the honorable. Yeah. It means the honorable will be flown out, but you see, is that it may not be sustainable. I was looking at the figures of how much we've spent in terms of treatment abroad. Yeah. So even just a mere ambulance, getting it, my friends, it's a problem. So if someone is struggling to get food and you're telling them that they need, you've seen stories, someone has to dig for the nurse in order for their bill to be covered. Now that person can't compete in the economy and create wealth. Yeah. So when you're creating wealth for citizens, again, you don't have to mimic the same citizens you're not feeding. So that's where, for me, I think the problem is in terms of the economic and physical policy of the country. Like, we don't have money, but now you have to raise more money from us so that you actually spend more money in fuel.
Yes.
than industries. How many industries do we have here that are actually being given serious subsidies? What is Teju Juice doing? Can we know how much is coming from Teju in terms of export? How much are we getting from our coffee?
Yeah.
How much are farmers, and we've been having coffee fights and etc. So in the end of the day, you feel like we're just a tired country. You're tired, you're hungry, but they're asking you for more tax. So I think that we need to, in terms of, that's how I actually view the economy right now.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Keep watching us right here on Focus on Parliament, where Honorable Moses, Mr. Kizito, and Mr. Aboneka are breaking down a lot of the complex issues around our economy. These are matters fiscal. And we all have the hope that Uganda should be better for us. We should have more money in our pockets and a better economy for everyone. Keep watching. We will be back with more technical aspects, especially around taxation, the tax burden. Thank you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back to the Focus on Parliament show, right here with me, Okotola. Today we are breaking down matters fiscal, critical issues that our economy is undergoing, and critical decisions that have to be made. But also criticizing and assessing how our government and our leaders are performing. Together with me is Honorable Moses Alepe, Chekri County. We have Mr. Kizito, Program Officer at Transparent International, and Mr. Michael Aboneka, who is an advocate. Thank you very much and welcome back. I'll start with you, Mr. Kizito. I think it was Winston Churchill who criticized overtaxing and said it's like standing in a bucket and trying to lift yourself up. We have had we're in a critical moment to do with our tax. We have a lot of bills that have been placed in Parliament. Is Uganda in this Winston Churchill situation? Are we standing in a bucket and trying to lift ourselves? Is the tax approach towards citizens sustainable for the individuals, but also the local enterprises? You're welcome.
I think the only time we get to that position is when you look at the percentage of Ugandans that pay what you would call direct taxes, especially when it comes to income tax. I think we are not even more than 30% of us. When you look at the people that pay corporate income, and all these things. So that's where the problem comes in, because then you have a few people who qualify for payee. So then you overtax them to ensure that you cover for the deficit. And currently, you see, some of us payee, we are still in that small threshold of about 30%, you know, on your monthly income. But what that means for a normal Ugandan is that if you get 1 million minus, you know, the 30% and what you remit to NSSF, your disposable income is affected. So then when your disposable income is affected, you can't invest as much as you'd have invested, but you also can't consume as much as you'd have consumed. So it becomes a vicious cycle that if I can't consume and I can't invest, that means even the local trader in the market won't make as much sales as they would have made. And that comes back to planning by government. And the question then would be, how can we ensure that, the 70% or more can also contribute to income tax? And I think the NRM government has been grappling with that. We've seen programs such as Operation Wealth Creation, we've seen the Youth Livelihood Funds.
PDM.
They were all under Wunaba Gagawali. And these were well-intentioned programs, but ill-prepared. Because what then we do is we tend to throw a drop in an ocean and we believe it will make change. For example, the PDM, we were spending about 1.3 trillion, if I may be corrected, but it was about that. But our intention is to make Ugandans in about, is it about 155 parishes rich? But with 1.3 trillions, you can't make these guys rich. Even if you are doing just one region of Busoga with 1.3 trillion, you can't make an impact. And what would make economic sense is you do sampling, get a good program, get about, let's say 100 parishes, give them this money, let them make economic sense out of it, and then let the fund revolve. So that if I'm rich today, tomorrow I won't demand for the same help.
Then there
So
be
that money
of
will
selection.
be given to probably,
Of
but
course.
as a government policy, then selection doesn't matter. You see, like we have Kampala as a capital city, no one is complaining. So if you want to take it to Jinja, that's up to your planning. But what matters most is that let us spend with the fundamental impact. We don't want to see some of these things happening. And most of the businesses are actually crying because it cuts across that there are a few businesses that actually register for tax, and those are the ones that are informalized. And majority of most of these guys are in the informal sector. They're operating under the radar. You can't see them, but they are making money, you see. And yet some of them are making actually more money than the ones that are registered for tax. So when you look at that statement of Churchill, probably that's when we come to that conclusion that perhaps we need to change on how we drive investment. And we all agree government can't give us all jobs. So we want to see how then government can foster business growth. There were some studies that really indicated that most of our indigenous businesses don't last for more than 5 years. You create a side hustle 1 year, you're financing it, then come to the third year, it has collapsed. Basically, maybe you hit a problem or you are knocked on your doors. And one of the key questions were then that how then can we help these local innovators and entrepreneurs to get access to equity? Because that's now the biggest problem in most of our developing countries. When you go to the developed countries and you have your business idea, it's just a matter of presenting the idea, and if it's good, they bankroll you. If the business hits a loss, insurance covers up for the loss. But most of us even fear to invest because one, you'll use your hard-earned savings to make an investment. And once you lose the money, of course, it's game over for you. So my brother was asking the money that was invested in UDB, it was about 400 billion, but still that was very little money if you want to promote economic development. And probably my thought would be that government should maybe start investing in programs such as public-private partnerships. You see, instead of me going to some of these commercial banks to get a loan to start a business, government should put even these monies of parish development model. They should go to the Uganda development banks and the microfinance banks, so that if I have a good idea, I'll just go and request for 50 million. For, even if we want to borrow to boost our economy, this money should be tagged to either soft loans, but with a backing of insurance from government, so that I invest, let someone, maybe commercial officers, they don't do any work at district. Let these commercial officers also be busy. Let them come and monitor our businesses. If we make genuine losses, of course they report and insurance covers. After that, we want to see how then every ordinary Ugandan entrepreneurs and everyone can be part of the money economy. But other than that, I think the 30% of the Ugandans and the businesses will continue to struggle, and also URA will continue to struggle, because when you look at now most of our tax proposals in the bills, we either propose to increase here, but on the same base. For example, when we come to pool betting and games tax, you realize that we are either increasing, but on the same
base.
on the same base, and probably that doesn't make much sense. You'd want to broaden
Expand
as much
the
as
table.
possible. When you go to now the innovations such as internet tax, of course those are harmful taxes, and the Honorable may agree or may not. But when you tax the driver of investment, that means you're killing investment itself.
Yeah.
Before COVID and before we saw the ban of Facebook, so many people were driving business on those online platforms.
So many.
But now when you look at the cost of data, every day I use about 2 GBs. So how many people in Uganda can afford to use 2 GBs of data every day? But the more you tax that, that means you're killing so many businesses that would have mushroomed, and you'd have collected more taxes. And I think the other narrative from some other countries and what other consultants advise are that probably you should make tax a bit low, so that one, you increase on compliance. You know, when my pay is about 15%, I won't feel it. So I can always easily declare. So if you have 30 Ugandan data overburdened, make it low, then you'll have about 40% or even 80% Ugandans willingly coming out to comply. But when you make it so high, then it becomes a deterrent measure. And when it becomes a deterrent measure, then the cost of administration definitely becomes high. And that's, I think, what Nayura is grappling with. You give them targets here, targets there, and tell them this I want 25 trillions. But sometimes they achieve it, but the means and the in which they achieve it, it's a bit pathetic.
Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe just a disclaimer to our viewers. We are discussing macroeconomic issues. So when you hear my brother saying 1.4 trillion is small and 400 million is very little, please don't
within the context, within the context of the 50 million Ugandans.
Yeah, on to Honorable Moses. He talked about driving investment, and one of the key aspects of URA is supposed to be to enable business growth. But perhaps, like I said, their KPIs, the targets that are given to them to be able to fund the budget. But also we see a lot of issues around how our government it relates with local businesses. Many local business people agree that, the international, for example, investors are given a lot of incentive, including small things like picking them from the airport, giving you land. But to speak like my brother, I believe Oxfam released a report that over 800 billion was lost in tax exemptions.
8 trillion.
Yeah. So, and I think that is, and another report also says it's not really one of the aspects that actually drive investment in countries. So those could be debatable, but generally, he spoke more from a macro perspective. But in terms of local business, do you think our tax framework is favorable? And if not, how can it be improved?
Yeah, thank you. One thing, of course, we know for sure, the only way we can run a government, local, federal, regional, or even national, is through taxes. That one is something agreeable. But now, the bit is, how do we get these taxes? Well, as he has submitted, the fact is the tax base hasn't grown. We're supposed to widen the tax base. In fact, what we are only doing now is we are deepening the tax base. The few of us, or the few Ugandans who are paying more. Who are taxed, have continued to be the very ones to be taxed. Government has decided that in the medium term, it is not going to introduce any new tax. That is good. But now, what does that mean? At what cost does it come? Now, you might not introduce any new tax, but you're going to add more on the weight of those that are paying taxes right now. That's why I'm saying we are deepening more than actually widening the tax base. You mentioned something. You know, in this country, we are mainly very informal. In fact, anything that it is easier to do informal things in this country. In fact, we are informal.
Unfortunately.
Generally, we are
Unfortunately,
informal.
yeah.
Okay.
We like
That's
it
why you
informal.
can even find someone is more at ease doing something informally than formally. So what am I saying? The informal sector, business sector, is actually has a lot of money. Just give a case of Chikugu. If you go there and see the volumes of money exchanging hands. The other day I was with someone on a talk show, and he told me that, you know, if you go, there is someone I can even tell, I can just ring and tell him that give me $200,000 US, without an agreement, without what, and he can just open his drawer and give it. So what does that mean? It means definitely there's a lot of business activity and definitely money in the informal sector. What we should be doing as government, as Uganda, and for this particular instance, URI, Uganda Revenue Authorities, to make sure that let's cast the net to the informal sector. Let's find a way of formalizing the informal sector. Let's make it very attractive for this informal sector to be formalized. In fact, now let's shift maybe those incentives to the informal sector. Because if it is taking too long for these so-called investors, for us to reap in from them, then we better go to the low-lying fruits, which is actually the informal sector. That one you will surely be able to get. That's why we are faulting. Now, whenever these tax bills are presented to Parliament, what I know is they are not based on any study. You will find that there are no regulatory impact assessments that have been carried to make a cost-benefit analysis on the new policy, on the new law, on the new taxation component you want to bring into place, so that it will really inform the decision that you will make about this. The other day we were with them, with the ministry. We said, first of all, to inform you, what is your basis of bringing these bills? Show us a regulatory impact assessment. Give us a tax evaluation report to show that because of this, we are moving to this. Just that is purely ideas, is purely thoughts, and it doesn't give concrete evidence on which you can base. So that is very likely to inform us. And that's why we are not moving any further. Like now the new proposals. They may be good, but you know we are still on the same people. We are digging deep on the same spot. So it is not helping us. For me, I really feel that, which we may have to agree with the Minister of Finance, that is the MDA that is charged with the policy. URI is strictly on tax administration. Even the targets come from Minister of Finance based on the policies they think. So we want them next time to carry out studies so that there is really an assessment on which we can base this bill. So, okay. Otherwise, that's what can really help us. Without that, short of that, we shall not be able to, because everything will just be something based on just thoughts, on ideas, and possibly hearsay and that sort of thing. So that's not how we should be able to have an economic model which can show us empirically how we arrive at some figures. That when we do this, we're able to get VAT by this much. And the effect is this. It will affect, or it will bring on board this type of things. Now we have 3 million taxpayers. This is always my question. Are they quality taxpayers? Are they?
They
Or
said
because
90%
Mr. Ola today wants to do
they
business?
say 90% of Ugandans have less than 1 million in their bank account.
In their bank accounts. You know,
So
some of these registered taxpayers could be Mr. Ola intending to do business with government. They tell him you must have a team. He registers when he fails to do business. he gives it up.
Actually, it could
So
be
you-
that they are talking about tin owners versus taxpayers.
Actually, I think it is tin owners.
So registered taxpayers.
In fact, the other day I was asking URA, you know, you have to separate two things. You normally like giving us a list of the best performing taxpayers.
But they're
You
tax
see,
collectors.
when you talk of MTN, you can only call them a taxpayer if what you're listing there is actually their corporation tax.
Corporation tax.
Otherwise, they are just merely revenue collectors.
Yes.
You are the one paying the tax. You buying airtime, buying
Yeah.
data,
Yeah.
buying fuel, buying soda.
They're just remitting. They're
Yes,
just collecting.
They are collecting
Yeah.
on behalf of government. So I told them next time you make a presentation to us, show us the real taxpayers, and then we can also commend the other tax collectors. Yes, we can also commend them.
That's a good one.
Those are things we really have to bring out. Now, I also wanted them to, we should also have like a database that at any one time they can know that during this, today, at the end of business today, Moses Aleper is as this tax liability. How many Ugandans have, with all that database, if you have big data analytics, how many of these taxpayers, how much do they owe, and how do you intend to collect that money? And that sort of thing. So these are the basics that we should have. That one can inform us to be able to actually talk of widening the tax base. That's when we can know that, no, these taxes can be contributed by everyone.
Yeah.
Otherwise, these people who are doing business, the big boys, that we may call them, may be big, but there are also big boys there that we are not seeing, that are below the radar, as he says.
Yes.
And so that's where we should focus ourselves, and I think that will help us.
Yeah.
So that we can also lift some weight. That tax burden we are talking about. Actually, it's a tax burden because where the real incidence of the taxes, that's where the burden is.
True.
So I think that's one way we can really help ourselves. We have now to change the way we're thinking. Should do things differently.
And I think it's a recurring theme between both of you that the tax base is something that needs to be worked on creatively. Sometimes we see very competent people in government, and this is perhaps you're going to, and this is perhaps an issue because then you start to wonder, okay, where do the analysis, these analytical people with complex problem-solving skills, where are their skills applied, or do they produce reports and they're not acted on?
Yeah,
You had something to.
If I lose it, I think it was a recommendation that we made. One, it was basically on how we can entice most of these informal people to come into the bracket. And I think we had made one of those recommendations. One was the tin, but the other one was to do some kind of a merger, because back then we had NIN, then you have a tin, then you have all these kind of identifications. And we thought if every Ugandan has one kind of identification number and it's shared across,
there's also NSSF,
so that when you go to URA for any business and they just capture your NIN, they'll be able to know your transactions in the bank and all this. One, centralizing data makes it easier for some of these MDAs, especially for tax purposes, to track on tax liabilities. But the other thing that we didn't want to lose is on the issue of incentives. Basically, I think most of the Ugandans haven't enjoyed this. And one of the most creative incentives was that if we make registration for tin very easy, that would be the first incentive. But then can we also provide probably 1 year tax holidays to these guys in the informal sector, so that one, give them a tin, they are already registered for a tax. Then to give them a holiday. And during that period of a holiday, give them a platform to be giving you returns, file returns, so that as they file these returns, you're able to study the sector. So that becomes your basis for research. So at the end of the year, you have every reliable data to tax this person. But when you come to, for example, the presumptive tax, you realize that some people that actually are beyond the threshold are taxed at a very low rate, yet those that are actually below are again taxed highly. So when you put in place such mechanisms, of course it becomes an issue of more like a carrot and a stick. And in the end you'll win. But then the last one I didn't want to lose, and this I wanted the honorable to take it, is how can we now start doing long-term planning? When you go to most of our developed counterparts, you know, they'll have plans of 50 years ahead. You know, while we were looking at Vision 2040, but for them they were at Vision 2060. You see, we have a development plan of 5 years, but before we even start and understand how it's going to work, it's already elapsing. Because you see, most of our MDAs are still going sector-based, you know, budgeting as opposed to program-based. So what if we start doing long-term planning? If it's an NDP, let it be probably 10 years or even 20 years in that case. And if it's probably we have our tax laws, can we then have a tax architecture of about, let's say, steady for the next 5 years? So that if we are researching and thinking through it, we know that in the next 5 years, this is what we have, so that it can shape our next trajectory. But every year, if we go through the same process, you know, we have unbaked, you know, results, and that's always affecting us.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just to time travel, when you were talking about merging some of the identifications, I think in China now, you can shop, you can get a bank loan with just a smile. Actually, you don't need any numbers. Your eye, and if you break traffic rules, there's a prepaid code that you just So that kind of synced system, really, I believe, is what we have all been discussing. And over to you. They've mostly been talking from. They've been advising on several issues, but one thing I wanted to come out was the service side. We have just had the pothole exhibition on Twitter, on social media, and I think it was Elon Musk that said sometimes the government is just the biggest monopoly. No, the biggest corporation with a monopoly of violence, unless for the purposes of this debate, it's really insistent on service provision. From a citizen's perspective, do you think our government is doing its best with its tax? And then secondly, how do you think corruption factors into this taxation mix?
Thank you. And so you see, as citizens, we give government two things. We give them the power through the vote, and then we give you taxes. So what do we expect? What we expect is effective, adequate services. Now, in my world of governance, the definition of tax to me, tax is quid pro quo. The economists, they will say tax is non-quid pro quo. You are expected to pay it and you don't expect anything. Now, to me as a citizen, and using the analogy of governance, is for me tax is quid pro quo. I give you a tax, I expect effective service delivery. Now, the best incentive for Ugandans to pay tax if the services are available. You've been to these countries, Sweden and the rest, and Germany, people are paying taxes, but you go to hospital, you find first-class treatment, education is available, because you see then people say, our tax is working. All of us have been to school.
German says, why aren't we even paying taxes? Why is this so low? Can you demand
for more? Yes. You've had this norm even in school. Our money, our money. We have to finish our money. So now, the moment we don't see the correlation between the taxes and the services, then there is a problem. Okay?
It becomes a corporation.
It becomes now a problem. It becomes now, yes, like you're saying. So, and there is a problem of the state being at the same time in the market. So once you fuse that, then there's a problem. Like you want to be the same government, but again, you're the one who is supposed to, you want to make money at the same time. You want to be the one to give service at the same time. You want to control, then it becomes a problem. Now, here, the pothole exhibitions and the rest, it just comes from that. That can't we have a situation where taxes speak? How do taxes speak? That a road is fixed without me asking. That there are drugs in the hospitals. That the interns are paid. Now, that's what tax speaks. That's what tax should speak. And then I'll know, I'll pay my tax very religiously because I know it's working. Now, once we give the leaders power, Honorable, give him power for 5 years, we expected to demand for accountability as a key principle of governance.
Yes.
So as a citizen, you don't just, Honorable agrees that they are our servants. His constituents are supposed to demand for accountability and say, you promised this. Other people have even promised a bridge where there is no river. And then they said, even the river we shall bring, and they were voted. So people were demanding, but where is the river? It has to be to that level of where citizens are demanding for accountability.
Quid pro quo.
So it's quid pro quo. So to me, it's quid pro quo. I give you taxes, I give you power, I expect services.
Yeah.
Now, the exhibitions, Uganda Health Exhibition, the Portfolio Exhibition, just shows you that actually Ugandans are watching.
Yeah.
That we all just need actually to do our job. And it had to take the president to say, I'm directing that we do a supplementary budget for that.
Yeah.
But where was the problem? Where was the problem? For those who are planning for Kampala, you know it is Kampala, it's a city of 7 hills. You know there will always be floods. They will spoil the roads. And what kind of roads are you constructing in Kampala? You've had the issues of people wanting to construct a kilometer at 8 billion. Those issues were there. So for cases to say we don't have fuel to do potholes, we don't have this and this, but what was the planning process? I know of a ministry that has zero allocation for this quarter. So you expect them to perform what? Zero allocation. I know. Zero allocation for this quarter, so they come to office and be there.
What?
Yes. So what do you expect them to do? So I think that we have to be very serious. You can't divorce tax from planning. They are all intertwined. So because then, as I finish on this, what hit me yesterday was for the PS to say, URA is collecting money, but somehow some of that money is not getting back to government.
Yeah.
I was in shock. So where does the money go?
Yeah.
If it is collecting, and part of the money it is collecting, that it is saying, we have even surpassed our target. But the PS is telling you some of that money doesn't come to government. So where does that money go? So there's also those various leakages. The corruption eats into the morals, the bone marrow. It is that cancer that eats into the bone marrow, which we all have to fight. Now, corruption is very bad to the extent that it will make us look like we don't pay tax. We will not have any incentive to pay tax. Because if people can steal blood from a blood bank, because ideally blood is supposed to be free because we donate. Now you think something that you're supposed to pay, if people can steal blood to that level, that especially in the public sector, that when you have corruption, the taxes won't work. You'll have to pay for everything. You have to go and pay bribe to be put on a list of people to see a doctor. And the doctor is telling you, I'm also hungry, I've not been paid for a month. First give me money, then I do a prescription for you. Now, that one becomes a problem because of now the corruption that has come in. But of course, it has its own context. If you don't pay people in time, if you don't pay the interns, they will say, you give me money and I put you on the list. Are you seeing this list? These are for pregnant women. They have all come for antenatal, but I can make you jump the queue at 5,000 because she has not eaten. I'm not condoning corruption, but that's the context.
The culture.
Yes, the culture. So if we fix and say, these are the few resources we have, how do we deal with it? And also we have to be a bold government and also not shy away. Because sometimes we take on so much and say, we shall give you. During campaigns, we shall give you. That one, I will give you. And then 2 years down the road, there's nothing. People are demanding. You're trying to borrow, you're trying to do patches. And the other one, as David was speaking, as I conclude, I ask myself a question. Why are tax bills and tax issues always taken in a rush? These guys are always putting Parliament on pressure. Honorable members, we have to pass these tax bills. It's April. April is done. They're supposed to read a budget in June. Okay? But we are always in the discussions. Honorable members, thank you for staying until 10 p.m. We have to pass these bills. Why are issues of taxation always taken in a hurry? Is it a plan that they don't want the MPs to ask those fundamental questions on those issues because we don't have time? So can we have research and in-depth discussions on those taxes as we continue? For example, I expected in this for the internet tax to be dropped because it is difficult to administer. Ask these telecoms, how do they actually collect the internet tax. Because the exception is if I'm using it for research and email. Now, how do they differentiate that the MDs I've bought are for email only? That tax is a problem. So I expected it to be dropped. And the MPs said, this thing is a problem. And remember the social media, why they removed it? Because your said it was difficult to administer. Then he introduced 12% tax on internet, which is even worse. So I expect that one to be dropped. So I think those are some of the things that I feel need to be.
And a lot of our time is spent, but just in a minute, we have several stakeholders. A lot about the show is to advise Parliament, to advise the public and government. Maybe in a minute, could you say a parting message?
I think my parting message is that let's be a responsive government and responsive leaders. Take feedback as a positive thing, because that is going to help. And you're not there to build your own castles, but you're there to build our Uganda. So let us build it together. We love this country. Let us build it together.
Thank you. Our viewers, Mr. Boneka, Mr. Kizito, you've really taken us through a lot of issues. Thankfully, you have managed to break it down in languages that many people can understand. In a minute, what is your parting message to our viewers?
I think on behalf of my organization and the Tax Justice Alliance, I think we thank our stakeholders. They have always given us space to engage. And most of the issues we share here have actually always been taken on very positively and in a more receptive manner. And we want to all agree that this country belongs to all of us. If I face a problem, probably I want to vote my member of parliament. And if he's not voted, probably the next person will miss out on effective representation. So we want to see a society where we take basically collective responsibilities. And I think that must be reflected in how we react on mainly issues of governance, but also issues of public policy. When you see an outcry, for example, on health, you shouldn't, because you're in government, you shouldn't come out and start being defensive. You see what happened with KCCA when we did the pothole. They received the complaints and everything, and the result was that the president actually directed that their budget is they get a supplementary. So what if Minister of Health also takes the same approach? Acknowledge the problem, and of course that's the beginning to a solution is you acknowledge that you have a problem. But every time we go defensive, of course we shall go through the same vicious cycle. And specifically speaking to corruption, this is what we do most at Transparency International and the local chapter TI Uganda. This year Uganda performed poorly because we have what we call the Corruption Perceptions Index. So last year we scored 27. So a score is like your marks. So out of 100, we got 27. And our position out of
F9.
Now you can say it more directly. And our position out of 180 countries were at 144. And in the East African region, we are just behind Kenya, because it's Rwanda, then TZ, Kenya, then Uganda. So directly you can say we are the fourth or the third last behind the pessimistic. But the main issue is that we have a long way to go, because the sub-Saharan average is 33. So if you're at 26, you're just below the sub-Saharan average. The global average was at 43, but that one we are still a long way to go. But when you come specifically to our institutions, and those are now specific institutional studies on bribery, you notice the Uganda Bribery Index was putting still police ahead, and these other institutions of the judiciary that takes the highest share of the bribe. Council is here. Your share was at about 500,000 on average, the average share of bribe you take.
Per minute.
I wish I could see the money.
So the problem of corruption is actually very grave, based on both the perceptions index, but also the Uganda bribery index.
Mm.
So what are we calling on Ugandans to do? One, let's call out for accountability. It's our right. But if we keep quiet and these things are happening, we will suffer the same. But also to our members of parliament, can you push for digitalization and also, you know, kind of merging some of these names? Like he shared, if you go to UAE, I'll give an example again, and you hit a traffic light, that money won't go to a police officer's account. You actually have no business with the traffic officer because your ticket is automatically, you know, sent to your account and you share. So what would happen if the same happens with, you know, the taxpayers? You just have to remit to an account and the money is reflected to the consolidated. You know, it becomes much easier, and you know, we kind of minimize some of those hemorrhages because our studies, when you look at the illicit financial flows, we lose about 2 trillion as Uganda per year. When you come to the tax expenditures, we lose about 8 trillion per year. When you go to the studies of IGG, the cost of corruption, we lose about 10 trillion per year. But in the local perspective, this year, out of the 50 trillion budget, we are going to pay about 9 trillion in debt servicing. So imagine if we didn't have this 2 trillion in illicit financial flows, 8 trillion in tax, whatever, tax expenditure. If we didn't have the 10 trillion in corruption, that means it would be better off.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive analogy, and I'm sure our viewers have also heard, and they'll be taken into account. Honorable Moses Alepe.
I won't dwell anything on corruption. I think Sexito has mentioned a lot, but I just wanted to say something, a quick one, that really in these hard times, I think government has done something very, very, very tremendous, which is worth really noting. One, it managed really, it played a role in controlling inflation. That one should be commendable about it. And then stabilization of the UGX, Uganda shillings. They really played a role. They used both the monetary and fiscal policy to do that. And then they were firm on not accepting subsidies, like our neighbor Kenya had accepted. I think that was a very good, bold and strong decision, which actually would have put us completely crawling, like the way Kenya is facing the wrath now. But what I can only say is on taxation, like I told you, I think what we need, being a member of the Finance Committee of Parliament, we're the ones who process the tax base. We did the consultations and really got very brilliant ideas from institutions like where Mr. Exito comes and many others, Uganda Law Society, even individuals. We got so much brilliant ideas. What we are going to recommend as a Finance Committee, that actually there must be we must include consultation into the DRM, the Domestic Revenues Mobilization Strategy, so that it becomes part and parcel of it, so that we can get these ideas and we plan holistically, very consultative, and I'm sure when we do this, we shall make very informed decisions on our tax regime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Moses Alepe. And our viewers, that brings us to the end of today's show. It has been very informative. I've learned a lot myself from engaging with 3 colleagues here. Thank you very much, Mr. Boneka.
Thank
Mr.
you for
Kizito,
having me.
and Honorable Moses. It's a great pleasure as always.
It's a pleasure.
And to our dear viewers, you have heard it all. Please go ahead and act on this information. And I think this brings us to the end. Till next week with me, Okot Ola.